Back here on the Central Indiana Sports Report, a special edition of the IU Report today, as Indiana knocks off Kansas State last night, 86-69. My name's Grant Shouse. Mike Hutsell is with me. Greg Mengeld, of course, is hanging out, producing this one here tonight. And Mike, that game last night, I think, kind of summed up Indiana's season a little bit. They played really well for a stretch, played really bad for a stretch, let Kansas State get back in the game in the first half, then put their foot on the gas in the second half. You were at the game. What'd you see from IU that night?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. They were great coming out of the first two segments of the game. It was 20-4. And then you hold that Kansas State team to 4 points over, I think, the first 8 minutes of the game. The middle 7 was bad. That's where we talked a little bit about in the preview. If Indiana has a bad stretch, Kansas State's going to be able to put together 16, 17 points. And guess what? They took a 16-point game and made it a 2-point game. Indiana got the lead back up to 12 by halftime. They didn't shoot it amazing, but they weren't afraid to shoot it. That first half, if it was within 40, it was going up. They shot 22 threes in the first half of the game, hit 7 of them, hit 5 of the first 12. So that kind of tells you they had a hot start there for a little bit. Encouraging signs from last night. They won a game where Tucker DeVries was not their best player. They won a game where Lamar Wilkerson wasn't their best player. Lamar came out of a shooting funk a little bit, but they got contributions from the others, the guys that you and I both have been a little bit hard on this podcast, Reed Bailey and Tatum Connerway, both stepped up last night and played huge roles in that win.
And Mike, honestly, I think that's where one of the biggest difference makers within this program is at this point. It's that in years past, especially in the Mike Woodson era, guys weren't playing well. I don't think you were seeing a whole lot of accountability from that staff. Like when Umar Ballo just sucks. You're seeing no accountability. You're not seeing him improve. You're not seeing him get better. But I think that some of those guys that we've talked about, like you said, Connerway, Reed Bailey, I think this staff has held them accountable. And that's a great thing. And you're seeing them step up and make plays like they did last night. Reed Bailey was outstanding. The one big play I really liked from him was early in the second half, the lob play to him. He caught it. He didn't finish. He kind of got under the bucket. He actually was more towards the baseline. He was kind of behind the bucket and pounded his way back inside and laid that thing back up. That was that's a grown man move. And we've seen him be pretty soft in these first 4 or 5 games of the year. That was one of the more tougher moves that we've seen from him so far this season. That's an encouraging sign. He really rose to the occasion on Tuesday night, and I thought played his best game so far. He was Indiana's leading scorer at 21 points. Connerway, I thought, was good. I thought he handled the ball better. I thought he got up and transition very good. And this goes to show Indiana's defense last night. That was Kansas State's first game where they haven't scored like 80 or 90 points. They're averaging around 94 points a game. And Indiana's held them now to a season low so far of 69. Nice, right? So I think
right.
that's
better
a
than
good
6-7.
I think Indiana's defense played really well on Tuesday night, and it definitely showed in the scoreboard. And their offense put up enough points there to win going away. The game never really felt like it was in question down the stretch.
No, they came out after halftime. It was a 12-point game, 39-27, I believe. And Tucker still hadn't scored, and they stretched that out to 20 within the first 5 minutes of the second half. And in the second half, one thing they did in the first half, they continued to have trouble defending without fouling. I think at one point the fouls were 10-3 in the first half. That's partially how Kansas State was able to get back in. And in the second half, they were the aggressors on the offensive end. They got into the bonus within the first 5-6 minutes of the half. They were able to stretch the lead. That's how Reed Bailey He's had 21 points. I think he had 13 free throws. I have to go back and check the stats. So, and the play that you talked about with Reed Bailey, the lob play, he showed a little athleticism that I didn't know he had, because at the game, that thing looked like it was bound for the band. There was no chance I thought anybody was catching that ball, and he got up high enough to make that catch and then reestablish himself and actually finish a tough basket. He's been so soft near the rim. That's what a lot of people have been frustrated by. He actually made some tough contested shots inside, which people hadn't seen from him yet. I think maybe he finally saw what level he's got to kind of rise to play something higher than Atlantic 10 basketball last night. And he responded. So credit to the kid.
Atlantic 10 basketball, Big Ten basketball are just obviously two different animals. The Atlantic 10 has been a really good league over the years, a nice league, but it's not the Big Ten. It's not the Big 12. It's not the SEC. It just obviously is a little more tougher competition. So hopefully as the season progresses, you'll see a guy like Reed Bailey, who's played on that level, start to progress and play better against guys his size, guys that are his caliber of kind of match up with him well. And the same goes for like Tatum Conaway and Lamar Wilkerson. Lamar Wilkerson's coming from Conference USA's Sam Houston State. Tatum Conaway's coming from the Sun Belt. There's so many mid-major basketball players on this team for Indiana that it's kind of become like a mid-major super team, right? Like you had Conaway, who was the Sun Belt Player of the Year. Davidson's a mid-major, and
And
Tucker.
I mean,
It's kind of teeters between mid-major and I guess whatever you call it. It's not a power conference, but and then you got to remember that Tucker DeVries played for 2 or 3 years at Drake. So these are guys that have played mid-major college basketball, and Tucker DeVries only played like 7 or 8 games last year.
like 8 games last year, yeah.
So they're still trying to adjust to big-time level basketball. And if last night or Tuesday night against Kansas State was any indicator of that, then that these guys can rise to the occasion against tough competition, that's a really good sign. That's a promising sign that they can beat teams like that. Again, we're still not going to know really a lot about this team, I think, until, well, I think next week's the biggest week so far of the year. Minnesota on the road, and you play Louisville, and then after that, Penn State and Kentucky. This is going to be a tough 4-game stretch for Indiana, and I think if they can come out of that 3-1 with a loss to either Louisville or Kentucky, I think we're going to like this team, Mike.
I've had an opportunity, as I've talked about a lot here. I see a lot of Louisville. I see a lot of Kentucky. Man, I wish that Kentucky game was the one in Indianapolis and the Louisville game is the road game. Because on a neutral court, I think they match up really well with Kentucky. Louisville's going to be a pretty tough, that's a pretty steep hill this early in the season. And then you got a conference road game thrown in there, which Minnesota is not top tier Big Ten. They're, I'd say, easily one of the bottom 4 teams in the conference. But it's the barn. It's the barn. I'm old enough to remember seeing Indiana lose by 50 in that building. And
I'm not, thankfully.
Well, I mean, it was a minute ago, but it was not a pleasant experience. So any Big Ten road game, I don't care who they're playing. I'm taking it as a challenge, and I'm glad they're getting Minnesota early with their new coach, because I think Nico Medved is a good enough coach that maybe later in the year they'll be playing better than they are now. So it's probably good to get that game out of the way in December rather than have to go late February down there, up there, wherever the heck Minnesota is.
Well, and that's the thing is that Minnesota is one of the weird teams that Indiana will play twice this season. So they'll play Minnesota to open up conference play at Minnesota, but then they'll get Minnesota later in the year at Assembly Hall. And that's like the second to last game, or maybe the last game of the regular season before the Big Ten tournament. So You're right. That's a big game coming up. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this team competes in conference play. I think Kansas State is probably as close as you're going to get to maybe like I don't know, an Iowa or Ohio State maybe in the Big 10 in basketball. So I think that's again that's a really quality win. I think Indiana even wins that game maybe on a neutral floor last night. And with that game being at home or being at home, a true road game, their first really true big home game of the season over holiday break, Mike, you were at the game. What was the energy like in the building on Tuesday night?
I was pleasantly surprised by it. I thought it was going to be pretty. I texted you a photo of the ticket prices driving up, and you could get in for $10, lower level, like 30, row 30 and in for 10, $11 with fees. And I'm like, man, this doesn't look good. I'm not expecting. And the parking lot was surprisingly barren. When I got there, I was like, this is going to be a pretty it was pretty easy to get in, which if you know the bypass at all isn't always the case. I was like, this doesn't bode well. But once you got in, you sat down. The lower bowl was there. It was pretty full. The you know, you could have picked your seat in the balcony, but you're having a really bad day if you end up in the balcony at Assembly Hall anyway. So
Have you ever sat
I,
up in the balcony?
it's the last time I did it, you weren't even born yet, Grant. I'll tell
I was
you
going to
that.
say, I've never done it and I never will do it. I don't care who they're playing. I'd rather sit at home and watch it, to be honest.
I mean, if you can get the first two rows of the balcony, you're probably okay. But if you got any sort of vertigo whatsoever, I don't recommend it. It's it's
And I hate heights. Yeah, that's why I'd
it's
rather
it's
sit at home.
it's pretty formidable. If you don't like heights, then I definitely don't recommend it. You kind of need a Sherpa, and you may run into a Yeti on your way up to that thing because it takes a minute.
It's a
But no,
hike.
the crowd itself, for no students being there, I was a little nervous about there's not going to be any energy, but the crowd brought it. I got to give it credit. They got loud when they needed to get loud. I don't necessarily think it rattled K State, but K State's kind of a veteran team. But they provided an atmosphere, and that was something I was worried about going up there.
And I really hope, like, next season, you see Indiana start to play more of these Kansas State type teams at home. They're going to play their bye games against Lindenwood and Siena and Alabama A&M. You're going to get your handful of those, but I just really hope Indiana can get more teams like Kansas State on the schedule, or maybe a nice mid-major program like an Oakland on the schedule, like a Western Kentucky. You kind of want to see come to town. Someone that plays
I'd like
well.
to see like a home and home with Cincinnati or something like
Okay,
that.
yeah, Dayton.
Dayton Xavier. They went to Xavier a couple of years ago and played, which was kind of cool, but they didn't get a return game. I'm with you on Western. I can see that. Indiana State, St. Louis. That would be kind of cool with Josh Hurd there. Not Josh
Uh,
Hurd.
Shirts.
Shirts. Josh Hurd's the AD at Louisville. Sorry.
But that's the thing with Indiana State, as I have heard rumblings, and I don't know how much this is true. I saw a while back that Indiana and Indiana State in a few years are talking about a home and home series. So where Indiana State comes to Bloomington and then Indiana goes to Terre Haute in a few years towards the end of the decade, which I think would be pretty cool. But some of those, games Indiana's gone on the road for in the past have not worked out, like the
You
like
could,
the game at IPFW almost 10 years ago that
I was going to
killed
say
Tom Green.
let's not ever go back to Fort Wayne. The Mastodons are not allowed back on the schedule.
What's crazy is like I forgot about that IPFW has beat them 2 years in a row.
Yeah, they got Crean and Archie.
Insane. Or when Indiana State blew out Indiana in Archie's first game.
Oof, yeah, Remember, I proposed let's have Archie come on the field for the ISU football game and pretend we were going to honor him and then just play highlights of that game and laugh at him.
Forgot about that. Back to Tuesday night. That's a quality win over a quality opponent, and hopefully over these next at least 4 games before you go back into the... I take that back. You know what? I take that back. Indiana has a 5-game stretch here till the Kentucky game because they're playing Saturday against Bethune-Cookman. That goes to show how irrelevant that game Saturday at 12 o'clock is going to be, that they're playing Bethune-Cookman, and we haven't even mentioned that.
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to play a little trivia with you, Grant, and I know we give you a hard time for age. Bethune-Cookman, coached by Reggie Theus, who played in the NBA when I was a kid.
Teammate of my uncle, John.
Teammate of Greg's uncle. Star of a really bad Saturday morning show called Hang Time. Coached at Louisville, coached the Sacramento Kings. But their assistant coach is a guy by the name of Billy Garrett. Do you know the significance of the Garrett family to Indiana basketball? Please know this, Grant. Okay.
Bill Garrett was from Shelbyville. He played at Indiana. He's the pioneer of basketball back in the 60s at Shelbyville. The gym at Shelbyville is still named after him. And his family, I know, has contributed a lot to Indiana athletics over the years, especially the basketball program.
Do you know his historical significance to college basketball?
I do.
He's credited with being the first African American to regularly play on a Big Ten conference basketball team. You are correct. So, kudos to Grant. He got it. That was
well done.
Well done, Grant. I was a little worried about that one going in.
Hey, I know my history, man.
That's good. That's the significance of Bethune-Cookman. That's the relevance of that game. It's the second time Billy Garrett's been back. That went in Woodson's second year. I actually was at that game. Indiana beat them by like 54 points, I think. I'm really curious what that crowd's going to look like on Saturday. The hangover from the bucket game. Saturday after things.
Mike.
You're probably right. If you ever wanted to get a cheap ticket for maybe a early Christmas gift for somebody, hey, you want to go sit on the low level at Assembly Hall? It costs you maybe $23 for 4 tickets. Maybe there's your Black Friday deal right there,
and a guaranteed win.
Although Bethune-Cookman did take Auburn to overtime in the opener this year.
What?
That Auburn team's not very good.
No, and this Bethune-Cookman program seems to be on the rise with Reggie Theus, so not as awful as they usually are.
But that's going to be a sleepy atmosphere. Go back to Tuesday, if we may. A guy we haven't brought up yet, and a guy that I just know Mengel and a lot of other fans of other Big Ten programs are going to hate here in a couple of weeks, is Connor Enright.
Already do.
First of all, Connor Enright's doppelganger was sitting next to me last night in row 39 of Section A. Morgan Wallen has done nothing to make people take any pride in how they look with these god-awful mustaches and really bad haircuts. But
Mike, one of my best friends transformed his look to look like Morgan Wallen. So he's easy to rage bait. You probably ask Avery what that means, but he's easy to rage.
I know what rage bait is.
Well, he's easy to rage bait.
If you know history, I still know some of the trends. I have a 14-year-old, thank you.
Okay, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's why I think you get some of this.
Avery called me a cornball the other day. So apparently that's a new thing.
That's been a thing, Mike.
Yeah,
we've been saying.
I mean, it was a thing. It was a thing in the 90s. I didn't know it was coming back.
That's what makes it so fun.
You guys are just taking our Gen X and just making it yours. It's bullcrap. If you guys actually go outside and start playing on bikes and drinking from the water hose, I'm really going to start getting upset.
Mike, I'm 21 years old, man.
I
don't even do that stuff.
Wow, Grant, you've lived a
The mean
That's
streets
true.
of Indiana.
Yep.
Connor Enright, though. Now let's go back to him. PJ Haggerty is a guy averaging 23, 24 points a game. We talked about him in the preview. He has 6 in the first half last night. He's turning the ball over. You could tell Connor Enright's never going to beat anybody with his athleticism. He's never going to be the best player on the floor for any D1 team. But you could just tell that guy was in that dude's head. He was traveling. He was dragging the feet early. He was trying to get a step on and just picking him up full. Enright was picking him up full court, doing some flopping. And Haggerty, to his credit, in the second half, had a big second half, and Tate and Conaway was rotating the defensive responsibilities as well. But when people complain about Connor Enright, I want them to watch last night. And Michelle texted me after the game, and he compared him to somebody that I hated, and I understand why now. He could be like a Diet Coke version of Chris Kramer, who I think may still be playing at Purdue. I don't know. The guy was in college for at least 3 decades, but just that guy that every other school absolutely freaking hates, and he's gonna be one of your favorite players because he's on your team.
He's that pest. There's a stretch there where I was driving, so I was listening to Don Fisher and Eric Sir, and Eric Sir kept saying about how much just of a pest that Enright was being in that game. He got in some foul trouble, and he said something along the lines of, well, Indiana needs him on the floor because he's been that pest to the Kansas State defense tonight. That's I think that's a good comparison. He's a nice addition to that team. He's a guy that played for Darren DeVries there for a few years at Drake, and I think that carrying some of that toughness over. The guy played at freaking DePaul, for God's sakes. How embarrassing is that? He played at DePaul for a year before he came to Indiana, and so he's experiencing probably a real program, a program that is taken a lot more seriously than freaking DePaul.
Well, DeVries went. I don't know how he didn't end up at West Virginia, but DeVries went after him pretty hard out of the portal. And Iowa, their new guy really was trying to. It kind of came down to those two schools, whereas people thought at first it was going to be just a layup for DeVries to get him back. So other Big Ten programs saw something with this kid. Early on, when you're watching him, you're like, okay, so he's pretty short, not a physical, doesn't appear to be physical, looks limited athletically, isn't a great shooter. What do we got here? And then you've watched him now for 5-6 games, and you're like, okay, he always knows where to go with the ball. They're the best. I've talked about the best version of this Indiana team has to have certain guys contributing, and he's absolutely has to be a contributor for the Indiana to be as good as we hope they can be this year, because just all the intangibles he can bring to the floor.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he can shoot the basketball too. It's the guy that can play on both ends of the floor. I'll be interested to see, like, when they play Purdue, how he can match up with, like, Braden Smith. Now, I think Braden Smith's obviously a better basketball player. He's a better version of Connor Enright, of course. But I'll be interested to see what Enright will do against a guy like Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer when they play later in the year.
The simultaneous flop between Connor Enright and Fletcher Lawyer at Assembly Hall on January 27th may cause it would be like an asteroid hitting the earth when those two guys flop at the exact same time. The annoyance level of the two fan bases with those two guys facing off. Fletcher Lawyer, a guy who looks like he's going to approach you on a bicycle and want to talk to you about the Watchtower, versus Connor Enright's Morgan Wallen knockoff. There's going to be a lot of Twitter memes about just how annoying, how punchable the faces are of these two guys facing off.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Can't wait.
Here, before we go, here's how I think, Mike, irrelevant the AP poll is at this point in the year. We did not even mention the other night, and we haven't mentioned yet that Indiana is now 25th in the country. They are in the top 25. They were in the coaches poll last week at 25th. Now they're in the AP poll at 25th. We've not even mentioned that. I think that goes to show how irrelevant the AP poll is at this point in the season.
Why'd you open the door for him to say, who's number one in that poll?
I haven't checked. Anybody seen?
No, nobody pays attention because it's November 26th.
Producer Susie, any idea who's number one in the?
I haven't checked in a while. I would. It sounds like Mike knows.
Know who's number two in the college football playoff poll.
Thanks so much to Mike and Grant for joining us once again. Don't forget, we'll be back on Saturday with our reaction to the bucket game, and we'll continue to react to all the IU games as they happen. Thanks so much for listening. Always appreciate it. Do us a huge favor. Share this podcast with an IU fan in your life. Help us spread the word that the Central Indiana Sports Report is here talking about what Central Indiana sports fans are talking about every single day. Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media. And I love Susie. Love you, Susie.